Moving into a new house can be a daunting experience for most. Me and my sister were very anxious about our new place. My dad had just been made redundant from his job, and we couldn't afford to rent the place we were living in any longer. A friend of our dad's had a place in the forest. It was an old house, very big, but because it was out in the boonies and needed a bit of maintenance, my dad's friend was willing to give it to us very cheap, on the condition that we tried to fix it up. He was a wealthy man, so for him, I think so long as the house was maintained a little bit, it was unimportant. Nonetheless, we were a bit skeptical. We were city girls all our life, and to move to the remote countryside was a culture shock that we hadn't anticipated. However, making the most out of the situation, we tried to adapt to our new environment. One thing that we found particularly creepy were our bedrooms. Damp, dark, and uninviting. No matter how much I tried to paint the walls, add brighter light bulbs into the light fixtures, did the eerie feeling not go away, and I never really felt at home there. Anyway, that was the background. On to the story. My room was your average size room. It was square in shape. I painted the walls pink and white, and it had a closet. Now, the closet was nothing special, but I always had a strange feeling from there. Please bear in mind that this was in one of the corners of the house. My room was just always my room, and I never really felt comfortable. I always felt like I was being watched when I'd sleep. I'd sometimes wake up in a sweat or have very bad dreams repeatedly. There'd be times where I'd go sleep over at friends' houses, and this would never happen. But the moment I was asleep in my bedroom in particular, did the bad dreams and strange feelings surge. This was also true if I slept in a different room of the house, for example, crashing on the sofa. I was completely fine. I ended up using the sofa far more than I did my own room, but my parents weren't too happy about it, so I tried using the sofa less and less, as much as it jeopardized my sleep. I had just bought a whole load of things from the mall. A lot of it things I didn't really need, and upon realizing this and being far too lazy to return them, did I just add them to a box I had in the corner of the room and tell myself that it was time I put it in the cupboard or closet. So I picked up the heavy box and started pushing it towards the end of the closet. It was only then that I heard a creak and a snap. Several of the planks that had been covering up whatever was underneath had given way. My first instinct was fear, because this house, as I mentioned before, was rented to us by a family friend, and if we were damaging the property, which was the opposite of what we were supposed to be doing, my parents, and therefore me, could get into trouble. So I removed the box at once and assessed the damage. It didn't look so bad, but using the flashlight from my iPhone, was I able to identify something beneath my room. I looked, and there were some stone stairs going down that had been covered by the space that the closet occupied. I didn't know what to do with this information. Should I tell my dad, or should I explore? Now, I was scared of the room, at night mostly, but during the day, that feeling wasn't there, and I wondered if it had anything to do with what lay underneath my closet. So, bravely, I started pulling apart the loose and weak planks from their original position. I only needed to take off 2 or 3 more until there was more than enough room for me to go down. So I did. I went all the way down, and it was a lot longer than I had anticipated. It felt like at least a story and a half. When I got to the bottom, it was pitch black, and there were no light switches here. I fumbled for my phone and dropped it in the dark. The flashlight was on, and it revealed a dark, little, dingy room. I kept looking around, seeing if there was anything of interest, but there didn't seem to be anything. Just as I was going back up the stairs, did I feel a cold chill run up my spine, and instinctively, I started turning around to see if I could see anything, whilst keeping my hand with my phone outstretched, to not only see if anything was here, but to maybe get the chance to record it. The feeling didn't go away, and when I heard a strange noise coming from this empty place, did I bolt it out of there and ran all the way back to my room. I was in tears. I don't think I'd ever felt so much fear in my entire life, and I just wanted to go back to our old home. I told my sister about it, and the next day we went down with tape, a few lights, and a few other bits and bobs in order to see properly down there. It was a very uninteresting room, to be fair, with nothing in it, just a strange and odd presence. After that, I started sleeping better. I wonder if it had anything to do with discovering that secret room. I don't know what its purpose was, or why it was there to begin with, but it makes for a good story, and certainly a handful of creepy situations. And after the room feeling empty and calmer for a few years, did I think that whatever was here before had gone away, until it returned with a vengeance. There were times when the fear would be so indescribably big that I'd have to leave the house itself and visit friends. It was terrifying. Everything came to a close when one night I was just hanging up my school uniform for the next day in the closet, and all of a sudden, a gust of wind pushes me and slams the closet door shut. The originator of the gust of wind was the closet itself, as all my doors, including my inside hallway door, were closed, so there's no way that amount of wind came from anywhere inside, because it simply didn't. And I think, but I'm not sure, that I heard my name being whispered through the wind as it passed through, but I don't know 100%. After telling my mum and dad about this, did they start getting concerned? They too had had strange stuff happen to them in their closet, but I was too scared to ask, as mine had been acting up far too much. My parents spoke and decided that they would try and get a smaller place in the city, and that country life really wasn't for them. As it was my dad's friend, we moved out pretty quickly, and were actually back in the same building but a different apartment, which was familiar but nicer. Here's the kicker though. A few years later, we're having a barbecue in a different house now. My dad had got promoted since then, and we can afford somewhere bigger. He's talking to his friend and asks what happened to the house we lived in. He says that the next people who rented it kept complaining about seeing something in the closet, a shadow moving very fast, which they couldn't see properly, and that their daughter started complaining about the little girl coming out of the closet at night and trying to speak to her. She said there was something strange about her face, but I never got that detail. All I know is that there's something weird going on in that house, specifically the closet, and I'm not sure what it is. Could it be a young girl's restless spirit, caught Within the confines of the room underneath the closet? Who knows? I'm just glad I never saw her, and hope the restless soul can find peace. My mum and dad split up when I was about 2. My dad eventually ended up with his current wife, my stepmother, and they moved quite far away. Me and my older brother Bob would go up and see him once a month. When he first moved away, he lived in this big house that was set out really odd. You'd enter the house into a tiny hallway, with the front room on the right, a dining room to the left. You'd walk through the dining room to the kitchen, which had the back door to the garden, as well as having the bathroom and toilet attached to the kitchen. Super weird. Upstairs was my dad's bedroom to the right, above the front room, and to the left was a really long hallway. About halfway down the hallway was my brother's room. To the left, if you were just walking down the hallway. And at the end, you came face to face with the door to my room. So, the story goes that the place was haunted. I was reasonably young, about 11 or 12. They didn't want to tell me about it because they thought I'd get scared, which I understand. I found out later of the things that had happened to them whilst in the home. My stepmother had an incident where she was in her bedroom doing her hair in the mirror. She looked up in the mirror and saw a young girl standing behind her with her arms crossed over her chest. My stepmother squealed, closed her eyes, and put her head in her hands. And when she looked up, the girl was gone. There were plenty of other instances of doors opening and closing, footsteps up and down the long hall, knocking about in the attic as well as the dogs acting strange, and we had 2 huge Rottweilers. One day I was staying the weekend and I felt really sick. My family had made plans to go out, but I didn't feel up for it. They decided to leave me at home on my dad's PC in the care of the dogs. They didn't want to let me be alone in case something happened. While I was playing on the PC, the dogs went really weird. They were normally quite docile, really friendly and extremely loving. Well, they started running about the front room barking. Every once in a while, they would stop and just aggressively growl at the fireplace. I stopped and tried to calm them down, but as I knelt next to them, one of them turned and bit me on the face. He was immediately apologetic, licking and whimpering, whilst asking for cuddles, but I was scared and hurting a bit. He didn't even break the skin, so it wasn't a bad bite, and I felt like I was going to puke. I ran to the bathroom, and the family got home. I told them what happened and they looked really concerned, but told me not to worry and to keep an eye on us. A little something about my room. It was dark and really small. It had a tiny window as well as 2 huge wardrobes in the corner. I never really felt comfy in that room. I hated being able to see the bedroom door, and I have no idea why. I often read in bed and then try to sleep on the floor, which is really odd now that I think back on it. I couldn't get comfy on that bed and always had an impending feeling of unsafe. Later that night, we all went to bed. Now, I like to read before going to sleep, so I was reading to myself as I was slowly drifting off to sleep when the bedroom started screaming. I know that sounds bizarre, but there was just this insanely loud scream coming from the room. I had no idea what was going on, so I immediately panicked. Who wouldn't? I tried to open my door and it wouldn't budge. I could hear my brother on the other side of the door also trying to open it, but I couldn't make out what he was saying. The scream was just too loud. I heard thumps outside the door, and I had no clue what was happening and just kept trying to open the door whilst crying. Suddenly the screaming stopped, and the door opened. My brother, dad, and stepmother were just standing there staring at me. I was sobbing, and my brother hugged me, and my dad asked me why I was screaming and whether I saw the girl. I said I wasn't, and my brother confirmed that he could hear me saying, "What?" throughout the screaming. I stayed in my brother's room that night. The next time I went to my dad's, he had moved homes. I heard the other stories years later. I'd hear other stories about the fireplace being pulled out and things being found. But to be honest, they sounded a bit far-fetched to me. I know this story might sound it too, but I know it happened because I lived it.